Welcome to Echoing Faith Today, a podcast conversation on themes of impact and relevance in the new Directory for Catechesis from the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of the New Evangelization. I'm Dr. Jem Sullivan, host and faculty in the School of Theology and Religious Studies at the Catholic University of America. On this podcast, we'll hear from scholars, experts, and those in pastoral ministry. So welcome back, and thank you for taking your place at this table of conversation. The Directory for Catechesis speaks of the importance of the parish community and the Catholic school in evangelization and catechesis. Today, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Dr. Leonard Franchi, professor in the School of Education at the University of Glasgow, Scotland. Dr. Franchi has co-written and co-edited the series, Reclaiming the Piazza, Catholic Education as a Cultural Project. Dr. Franchi, thank you so much for joining in this podcast conversation. I'm very grateful for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jem, and thank you to you and all the team for the invitation to take part in this very important series of events. Great.
You're most welcome. A first general question. In June of 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic, the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of the New Evangelization published the Directory for Catechesis. From the perspective of your teaching and research interests, what is the significance of this document for the Universal Church?
Thanks for the first question then, Jem. Well, the fact that it is there in publication is itself significant. That's important. Its very existence is important. This reminds the whole church that unless we catechize, unless we teach, we are not a church. The Great Commission at the end of Matthew's Gospel is not an appendix to Christian life. And that great phrase, go teach all nations, means quite a lot. And we have to ask what it is we teach and how we will teach it. I'd also say that the origin of this directory in the Dicastery for New Evangelization is also worthy of note. This phenomenon of the new evangelization has many roots, but one of these is the sociology of disaffiliation and the lack, we could say, of a Catholic culture, I'm using those in speech marks, itself a hugely important term. And having catechesis within the remit of this dicastery shows us, I think, that catechesis itself is the heart of the new evangelization. And perhaps that the new evangelization could be a result of poor catechesis in the past. That being said, as I said before, the question arises, what are these essentials of the Catholic faith and what methods of teaching should we use? And maybe we'll come back to those specifics later on in the podcast. As my research interests are in the wider question of education and religion as found in Catholic schools and HE institutions, how this our church's catechetical vision is woven through such bodies is a hugely interesting field of study. So any new document from the magisterium on this theme has something to contribute to the field. I think what's important also is to locate this directory in the proper context. It's the third directory since Vatican II, and this one is a partner to the Synod on the New Evangelization of 2012. And if you would bear think back to those times, it had 58 propositions. And it's also linked to Evangelii Gaudium from 2013. And we can also see the Instrumentum Laboris for all of these, for that synod. But to me, the key general features of the directory would be as follows. It's the proposal of a kerygmatic catechesis, not as preparatory to mystagogical catechesis, but more like the driver of the catechetical process. It's the call to faith, which we must hear time and time again. And therefore we must consider how to foster what Pope Francis says is this culture of encounter. But before doing this, we need to think about what it actually means. Encounter to me is not a one-off event, but suggests a lifelong, ongoing relationship with God and his church. And this leads to this Catholic culture which emerges from our lifestyle. And the directory, the new directory, also addresses two pressing and obviously interconnected issues. That is digital culture. We're here today because of digital culture and the globalization of culture. And the directory, as we all know, is concerned with how we offer formation, which addresses the needs of individuals in a time when we could say the rush to standardization is common. And why is this important? Well, as the directory says in its preface, faith, in fact, and I'm quoting here, is transmitted through interpersonal connections and is nourished within the circle of community, end of quote. And the rise of digital culture, as we know, has many benefits, but can also reduce the human person to being little more than a user of technology, and for whom technology is the portal through which all of life is lived. We watch sport as opposed to playing sport. We have online friendships, but no one to share a coffee with after a lecture. And of course, nowadays, watching Mass online, not actual participation. And how often do we see people walk along the streets that are around the campus or whatever with their heads bowed down towards a handheld device, and who cannot even last the time it takes to have a beer together without checking their phone every 2 minutes. Beer or coffee or tea. You don't have to like beer, you can have anything you like. But, and also this notion we get in the directio of the proper formation of catechists. And all of chapter 5 deals with this and ends with this reminder of having centres dedicated to A, this basic formation of catechesis, B, centres of specialisation for officials and leaders of catechesis, and C, higher institutes for experts in catechetics. This would seem to be a call to action across the universal church. And it might seem like another task on the already long to-do list for bishops, but it is surely a core activity without which the church could too easily drift without purpose and end up like that NGO against which Pope Francis warns us so often.
Thank you so much for highlighting so many points that the Directory for Catechesis really brings to the fore, kind of brings to the front burner. And first of all, it's that charismatic catechesis, that is to be this evangelizing encounter with the person of Jesus Christ is now placed not only at the beginning, but through all of the stages, all of the phases of catechesis. So thank you for that reminder, but also that call to faith, which is at the heart of the directory itself, in the midst of this digital globalized culture that we find ourselves. So good reminders.
Yeah, thank you.
The Directory for Catechesis notes that the parish is not an outdated institution, but precisely because of its flexibility, it can assume different contours depending on the openness and the missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. What does it mean to speak of the parish as an evangelizing community?
Now, in the first place here, to speak of the parish as the evangelizing community for many people will be like hearing a new language. I mean, how many people at weekly Mass would even see their parish as an evangelizing community? And that's not to make a critical judgment. It's simply, I think, a reflection of reality. And it remains a challenge to speak of our parishes in such terms, especially with flexibility in travel and different Mass times and people trying to find a Mass that suits other parts of their schedule. So maybe this idea of belonging to the parish as where you worship on a regular basis is something we need to recover. But we have to start somewhere. I mean, reforms of parish life can't just be about talking about it. There has to be concrete action. And that's where I think this importance of dialogue, authentic dialogue, and fresh thinking or creative thinking, it is made clear. Now, okay, how can this be done? I think before giving some suggestions, it's good to talk about this idea of personal holiness. And authentic holiness is not, I don't mean expressions of external piety, but authentic holiness is a form of attraction. And the life of the parish has to develop this in its parishioners. And this is always going to be a response to divine grace. And that's why, from where I'm sitting, my perspective is the sacramental life of the parish is what takes precedence. Now, for example, I'll give 3 quite practical ideas here. And the first one would be that we need to take great care with the celebration of the liturgy. Now, we don't want to get involved in the pros and cons of the different form or formats of liturgy. That's another issue. But whatever form in which we celebrate the liturgy, it's to be done with prayerful reverence. And we talk here about the pastors, so we don't want to put all the emphasis on their actions, but the homily should be practical and to the point and not overly intellectualized. I think, as Pope Francis said, it shouldn't be more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes, something. The idea would be keep it short, to the point. But alongside that, I would also say that we need to consider the availability of daily mass for parishioners who might work, if I can use the term, standard hours. So if we are really keen to develop the parish, the way mass is, that the timetable of mass is something which we need to consider. We might need to refresh how we approach that. The second thing I would suggest is the practice of Eucharistic adoration. And to do that, we need to open the doors of the parish. We talk of open doors, and sometimes we use that phrase in maybe symbolically and metaphorically, but open doors can also mean the doors of our parish are open beyond mass times. Now, I know there might well be security issues, and yet we need to take that into account, but finding ways through starting off an hour a day for adoration, maybe 2 hours, whatever, to encourage the parish to be alive at these times, out with the mass and also with other services too, is a sign of the parish trying to recover a sense of being at the centre of our spiritual life. And I'd also consider that the sacrament of reconciliation or confession, whatever our term is, can have much higher profile in parish life. Again, there'll be creative ways of doing that, of timetabling, scheduling, availability, inter-parish cooperation. It can be done to let people see that this is not something we just do once a year in preparation for Easter, if that, but it's part and parcel of the new evangelization. We respond to divine grace by going to confession. Now, around these different ideas of the sacraments, we can then build the forms of formation, programs of formation, if we can talk about programs of formation, ways of formation, again, always adapted to the circumstances of the parish, and again, always aligned to concrete action in the community. These things should be making a difference in the parish life, also in the life of the community in which the parish is situated. And we also consider the three transcendentals, truth, beauty, and goodness. And is our parish a place of beauty? Now, that does not mean it has expensive furnishings or renowned works of art, no, but maybe more simply that everything is looked after well. The grounds are maintained to a good, maybe a high standard, and that there's a sense of order apparent when we enter the church building. This is a place where we see this is taken care of. And that to me is a very small sign, but a very important one for how we see the parish. And the director mentions this as well on a couple of occasions in point 108, that the church, I quote, therefore bears in mind that in order to reach the human heart, the proclamation of the risen one must shine forth with goodness, truth, and beauty. End of quote. Then in 109, the way of evangelization is the way of beauty, and therefore every form of beauty is a source of catechesis. That's 109. Therefore, to make our parishes reformed in line with beauty is not just about adorning the parish. It's part of the catechetical mission of the parish community. People can see, they can feel the truth in the life, in the structure of the parish. Now, missionary creativity. There's a challenge, eh? Often the word creativity can help. What comes next? But let's think about how digital culture can act as a pathway to parish life, to be more involved in the life of the church, have the sensus fidelium, not as a parallel way of being Catholic. For Christians, the word was made flesh, not virtual. Now, again, there are plenty of examples we can take about parishioners and pastors using email lists to contact parishioners, about parish events, to build up networks, have rosary groups, parish prayer groups, all of these things which we know are going on, not just during, but also before the pandemic. And we can see something here of a move towards making the parish more attractive. And one way, again, to do that is the attractive parish websites. Some have wonderful websites, some have Facebook pages, Twitter feeds, some it's maybe a work in progress, we would say. So we need to consider how we cooperate across parishes so that the level of expertise which might be in one parish can be shared with those who might have other areas of expertise. So these would be some places where the parish can be given, that's the word reboot, the best word we can say, in order to carry out its evangelical, catechetical mission.
You know, I so appreciate all of the ways in which you looked at how a parish can become truly an evangelizing community. And they're so practical. But what I appreciate is that it's really centered, radiating from the liturgy, the source and summit of the Christian life, right? As the Vatican II tells us. And that really has to be the starting point for all of our re-envisioning of parish life. It's the liturgical life. And from that flows all of the ways in which a parish is truly a missionary community. And so I just really appreciate that. And of course, the directory points to that in many places. You know, you've mentioned this already, but the directory for catechesis goes on to say that all pastoral activities of the Christian community are to be re-envisioned in a missionary vein to support this renewed impulse of evangelization. In Article 303, the directory offers three aspects of renewed catechesis in the parish. Could you share with our audience your thoughts, your insights on these three aspects of renewal of parish life as the directory presents it?
Yeah. When the directory first came out last year, I got my copy, and as I would normally do, I skimmed it. If you can skim something deeply, that's what I mean. I went through it quite quickly just to get the flavour of it. And I thought, this looks very interesting. So having done that, I gave it a first, what I call a good read. And when I finished that, I said, I need to read this again because I felt it was so rich, so full of meaning, and a book which was not just designed for those involved in catechesis. My feeling was, this is actually a charter for the life of the church at this time, with teaching at the heart. So I preface my comments with that. Now, in Article 303, we've got these aspects, three aspects. The first is the community of missionary disciples. Again, very, very charismatic language. And how can we build and maintain and develop the idea of a community when there are so many counter forces to this ideal, like secularization, identitarianism, people being pulled away from participation in the life of the church? And if you want to be missionaries, if you want to form a community, one thing to consider is we are all weak human beings. Original sin is a reality all around us. Therefore, we have to accept our weaknesses and reject the pride through which we see ourselves as the sun around which all else revolves. And that's why I made the point about confession earlier on. To be missionary, we have to look at ourselves and reform ourselves. If we reform ourselves, we are reforming the church. And this idea of being missionary means going outwards, not just to make more people members of the parish. That's part of it. But we would also think well about not letting the parish become the centre of all we do in Catholic life. All we see cannot just be our fellow parishioners. We need to engage with those who are in other walks of life, maybe other Christian traditions, other religious traditions, or of no tradition at all, because discipleship, to be mission, means to go beyond those maybe comforting barriers and move into this world around us, where the idea of dialogue is more than just a few pleasant words, but involves maybe some deeper conversations, deeper debates. And the second point here, the second aspect is the missionary mentality, okay? And this allows us to have this mentality where we see the parish as a source of our spiritual energy. We need something to help us be the evangelizers. So we let go of these preconceived ideas and we realize more and more that we're actually quite vulnerable and shaped by the Holy Spirit. And that lets us see that those people to whom we are directing our activities are not just like targets who are just waiting for us to come and evangelize them, they will enrich us in turn. We gain from going out, we gain from that. And this allows the groups of Catholics, individuals, etc., to set up initiatives in culture and education which might not be explicitly evangelical or catechetical, but they are what we use the term sites of pre-evangelization, forming people to appreciate truth, beauty, and goodness through education, through culture, through the arts. And we don't need permission to do this. It's a way of moving into the world, the secular, we're saying, there is something here which we think is of value. And if you knock and ask, we will tell you the source of this truth, beauty, and goodness. And the third point is about the catechumenate and this idea of formative offerings inspired by the catechumenate. And as we've noted that the parish life is or should be centered on the liturgy and the sacramental journey. And the catechists of a parish, okay, they're all catechists to a certain extent, but there are those who are specifically charged with that. Now we call it a ministry. And they are part and parcel of parish life. They're not a small group on the margins of the parish. They are not the elite of the parish, but they are those who are working on behalf of the parish. And to see the catechumenate in this way is to see the parish as being on a journey. And the way I often suggest to students about this idea of the journey is to recapture, rediscover, learn about the fasts and the feasts of the liturgy. We're quite good at the feasts, maybe not so good at the fasts, you know, and how these elements can shape family and parish and school life. And in doing so, we recover the importance of proper feasting, which is not the same as excess. And we realize that fasting is not just about improving our physical health. The two kind of work together and show how to be embodied in the church is to allow ourselves to be shaped by these elements. So these are just maybe some ideas we could take on board to make our parishes, our way of living, maybe more attractive, but we have to reform ourselves first.
No, and that is just the excellent starting point, because that's what the directory, I think, really, to me, reading that text really is that call to conversion that begins with me, with each member of the community saying, I am in this personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm called to ongoing conversion of life. And through that journey of this personal conversion, the whole community now comes to share in that life of faith. So that just really is such a good point, a reminder as we think about re-envisioning parishes as missionary communities. I also really liked the point you mentioned about how, I think for the most part, when we think of evangelization and catechesis, we think of people coming to the parish. They come to us, to our doors, to the parish space, and then we share faith. But in fact, I think this is what Pope Francis, I think, has been saying now so powerfully, is that now is the time to go out of the parish boundaries and precisely go into the heart of culture, into the heart of the byways and the highways, as it were.
The piazza.
Exactly. Exactly. To bring that. And so it's that moving out. So unless one has, in fact, one is part of a missionary community, one does not have the ability, I think, to move out, as you said so well. So I think that's just another really important point. And then again, going back to the liturgical life of the church, the feasts and the fasts. I teach courses on liturgical catechesis, and really that's what we emphasize here, is that that's the entire life of the church. Liturgical life radiates from the resurrection of the Lord, but it's in time. We celebrate the meaning of the Lord's resurrection in time, unfolding in every day of the liturgical year. So to recover that in a vibrant way in a community is so important. So thank you for all of those really excellent points. I want to shift a little bit from the parish community now to the school, the Catholic school, which interestingly, the directory says is not so much, first of all, not so much an institution, but a community of faith. The Directory for Catechesis notes that the Catholic school participates in the evangelizing mission of the church, it is the privileged environment in which Christian education is carried out. How does a Catholic school participate in and contribute to the evangelizing mission of the church?
Now, there's a fantastic question because lots of things come together here. Now, this can also be summed up in another question: why Catholic schools? Now, when we look at the directory and do a quick check, it takes up the theme of Catholic schools only occupies about 10 paragraphs, and the directory has 428 paragraphs. I wonder if this tells us anything. Perhaps if we focus too much on the Catholic school as the prime site of evangelization, we are missing something deeper about the family and the parish. But Catholic schools, nonetheless, contribute, and they must contribute, to the evangelizing mission of the church, first of all, by being great schools. That's so important, that we show truth, beauty, and goodness in the way our schools are really good schools or excellent schools, which are attractive to everyone because people see the quality of education offered. And this is shown by the culture of the school, its commitment to integral human development, its articulation of Catholic social teaching vis-a-vis staff, pupils, parents, the wider body of people involved in the life of the school. I've often said that a Catholic school for a teacher, no matter his or her faith tradition, should be the best place to work because it's living out Catholic social teaching in the way employee-employer relationships, so to speak, are designed. But for the life of the Catholic school, it doesn't add on religion to an already established state curriculum. That's not the ideal. What we're looking at here is a way of seeing education, its aims and scope through, to coin the phrase, Catholic eyes, and how this Catholic vision of education can be woven through the curriculum. The Catholic vision of education, and there's lots of work being done on what we mean by Catholic curriculum, if that's a term we can use here, but it suggests as a way of understanding and developing education which is unique to this great tradition we have inherited. Now, we know that the directory notes the Catholic school is a community of faith and an ecclesial subject, and therefore its Catholic identity cannot be laid to one side. So what does that look like? What does it mean in practice? Well, I think it requires, first of all, a very specific religious education programme, which is complementary to the wider catechetical initiatives which take part in the school and all the various activities of the parish and the family. In this sort of partnership, we see that in the Congregation for Catholic Education's documents over the last 30 years, we want to have a very nuanced relationship between catechesis as the whole thing, but the RE programme in the Catholic school, where the RE programme is about the penetration of a particular area of culture by the Christian vision. And catechesis alongside that is how we deal with personal faith formation. Therefore, there's a nice sort of marriage of ideas here. And of course, RE lessons, for some can be catechetical. For some, it could be pre-evangelical. For some, it could just be some knowledge. And knowledge that way is the benefit of that lesson. So we can see that the way we teach RE is having different audiences, but the content rooted in this tradition, taught in a way that's open, but also not shying away from the difficult issues, offering we'll call it the Catholic understanding of particular issues to all people, offering that as a contribution to improve the way in which we live together as a society. That would be, to me, the starting points of how the Catholic school can be part of this moment or these movements of new evangelization in a way that shows, first of all, the words Catholic and education go together. They are both equally important in that partnership.
The question of standards of excellence, that's something I think that we have really have to come back to over and over again, especially in the United States, as we face some really critical moments now in Catholic education. We had over the past year or two, hundreds of schools closing, Catholic schools having to close their doors, mostly for financial reasons, enrollment, declining enrollment. And I think you're absolutely right, is that it has to be rooted in that sense that even our commitment to academic excellence is rooted in our, the gospel mandate to go and preach and make disciples of all nations. And so it's not just something that we put as as a burden, as it were, on the community, but it's something that comes out of the gospel vision of what it means to be this integral human formation that you talked about. And so I think it's really a challenge for us, and I really appreciate your insights in this area of just recovering that sense of being an ecclesial community, a subject that is part of the evangelizing mission of the church. Given your research interests and teaching, are there any other themes in the Directory for Catechesis that you wish to speak about? Also, the project that you're involved in, we'd love to hear a little bit more about that. So,
yes. We'll begin with Reclaiming the Piazza, okay? But it's an interesting title, and the notion of the piazza is the place, the space of public dialogue in Italy. Those of us who have been there very often, we know how the Piazza of Rome, people walk around and they walk and they talk. They're not going anywhere in particular, they walk around the piazza, and that's the space where, like the agora in the Greek tradition, people can come together and speak and share dialogue. Now, our idea in these books, in Volume 3 due out this summer, is to show in Volume 3 how we can communicate Catholic culture in a way that's dialogical, in a way that's a proposal, not top down heavy, but here are ideas which can shape society, which are good for everyone, but they come from this tradition. So we have chapters on economics, we have chapters on fashion, we have chapters on history, education, literature, music, and a whole range of things, architecture, or the social sciences. We have a chapter on, or even on gastronomy from a Glasgow restaurateur. So all these things, to me, are part of this vision of life around truth, beauty, and goodness. And we're hoping, we've been very fortunate in all the books. The 2 books so far have been launched in Rome in the Aula Paolo VI under the auspices of the Dicastery for New Evangelization. And in Volume 3, we have a wonderful preface by Archbishop Fisichella himself. So we're hoping this series of books will be something positive for the church, but also for society. Now, moving into the other issues in the directory, well, there's so many. The notion of divine pedagogy, which some people misunderstand as simply about teaching methods. It's much more than that. It's about God's revelation, the workings of grace. And also the idea of, which doesn't so much come through the directory explicitly, but is woven through it, this notion of Christian humanism. The idea that there's something there in this Catholic Christian tradition which offers a background, a support system for the way in which it presents its mission in education. And I don't think there's a nice partnership here between the courtyard of the Gentiles idea from Pope Benedict, this idea of the place of encounter, and Pope Francis' culture of encounter. It's about looking beyond our immediate circles, whether it's in the courtyard where we invite those who are not of faith to come and see, and in Pope Francis also in the culture of encounter, and go and meet. And together these are the same idea of the movement of people to bring the gospel, to bring that message of culture to all people. And essentially, the emphasis on truth, beauty, and goodness, the Catholic school, the Catholic university, is a reminder of the incarnation, these physical sites. We see them, we go there, we eat together, we talk together, we have coffee, beer together. And these are not incidentals, they are part of it. In the Catholic university, the Catholic college, the refectory, the canteens are an important place, where we share the food of physical life together. And that's a message we have to recapture and reclaim and represent to all of those around us.
So that's a wonderful place to leave our conversation.
Dr. Franchi,
Thank you so much for your time and for your insights, both on the parish and the Catholic school as evangelizing communities. You've given us a lot to reflect on, and I'm very grateful for your time and your insights. Best wishes for your teaching and writing, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
I do indeed, Jem, and thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be part of this and to see you.
You're most welcome. Thank you for joining in this conversation with Dr. Leonard Franchi. Please stay tuned as we continue to discuss themes of impact and relevance in evangelization and catechesis. Till then, keep the faith and keep echoing the faith. I'm Dr. Jem Sullivan. I hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Echoing Faith Today, hosted by Dr. Jem Sullivan, produced by the School of Theology and Religious Studies at the Catholic University of America, and edited by Anthony Apostolides.